You have one precious life. How will you make your money work for you? It's time for Sage Money Conversations, where your financial happiness and confidence are always the subject. Here's your host, certified financial planner, Barbara Norman.
Welcome to Sage Money Conversations. I'm your host, Barbara Norman. At Sage Money Conversations, we like to talk about the vulnerabilities of money and how we can use money to bring more joy and meaning into our life. We are blessed to have Kelley Owens here today. She's a real estate attorney for public entities for the last 13 years. She's the chairperson at her firm's business and real estate practice group here in San Diego, and she loves to mentor other attorneys. Kelley graduated cum laude from USC and received her graduate degree from USD, so she is no slacker. Unfortunately, she and her husband racked up over $300,000 of student debt along the way. And so Kelley is kind enough to share her story so she can help others get out of debt and, like her, be able to invest and have some fun along the way. Kelley, welcome. Oh my gosh, there is so much shame around debt, and I can't thank you enough for coming on and telling us your story. So I'm going to venture to say that I think a lot of people end up with 6 digits of debt coming out of college. How did you do this? And you have small kids, and you've only graduated 13 years ago. This is phenomenal. So how did you do this?
So how did I get out of debt? Should we start there? Or,
yes.
I think you nailed it, though. If you have to know where you are first. I had to come to grips with the fact that even though, I have some degrees with some letters by it, all that, I made some bad decisions pretty early on with money. But I say that in a way to learn from it, not in a shame way. I had to at least recognize, embrace, and get really, really honest with where we were with money. Because attorneys, we're notoriously good at justifying things and kind of making things seem different than reality, if you will. Sometimes. Yeah. But sometimes that still could be a bad thing, especially when it comes to the topic of money. So really that first step was finding out where we were, writing down all of our debts, which was very, very scary. Yeah.
That is very scary. So what I'm hearing is you took ownership of it. You were compassionate with yourselves. You forgave yourselves, but it was like, that's where the road stopped. No more victimhood. You took it on. And so 300,000 is a lot of money. How did you, what were some of the first steps when you started working up through that?
Yeah. So I would say it was kind of this great combination of the right emotion at the right time and then discipline with a framework. So the right emotion was, you described it, we had this, what we call a healthy level of disgust. We looked at that giant amount of debt and started looking at the numbers, and, we had that emotion there. And then where we started to find the discipline and you would think of more traditional steps was in this program called the Oola Green Gap. And the very first step in that is you have to, again, identify where you are, but then you also set a monthly budget. And that was one thing that through the first few years of marriage, my husband and I were very lazy about, and we didn't really think to even do that because we were so busy. And so we got started by sitting down and looking at where our finances were right there, which was setting that monthly budget.
Okay. It sounds like you had a really strong partner in this. I think that's true. Coming out of college, it's like for the first time, you're making money like you've never made before. You have demands like you've never had before. It's time to buy cars and houses, and you had babies. And so I could see why a budget would go by the wayside. I think too, Kelley, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people, when they look at doing a budget, they go into this deprived mindset. It's like budget is almost like saying diet, and it might last for a short period of time, but it doesn't take long to fall off the wagon. So how did you do this?
Yeah, that's such a good way to describe it. And that's what I attribute with going back to this green gap. What I love about it is you're not just setting a budget to find out how much, how little can you spend that much from that scarcity approach. Instead, you're identifying what's called the green gap, which is actually the money left over, the green left over. So it's a positive thing to sit down and look at the numbers so that you can say, hey, ideally you want a little bit left over, that green gap left over. And then this program gives you a formula to divide that up. But what I love is that very first step, you're not just doing a budget, to your point, to be like, all right, what kind of diet do I need to go on? Instead, it's like, what kind of treat could I have if I do this right?
That's
definitely.
a great mindset. You know what I love about that is it also helps us to think about what's important to us in life and living with more intention and meaning. So what was in your guys' green gap?
Yeah. So in our green gap, it was very little at first because, we had actually, I think it was a red gap in the negative. But within that, it was after we, made our big student loan payments, after you paid out the house and, living in California, that's always, a big part of the budget. So, but what was left over was this little amount. And we looked at it and said, okay, that was surprising. That feels good. Once we got it in the green, it felt good to have that. And we started to try to add to that green gap by like selling things or cutting out our personal cell phones. And then within that little gap left over, I think at that time it was around $500 a month. And we would take it and put it through this formula, which is 45% extra payment to your debts, 45% payment to your investment, and then 10%, this was my favorite part, 10% left over for fun. So things like the movies or saving up for a trip. So again, going back to that more positive spin, you actually had permission to spend money, which for somebody like me who loves to spend, my husband's a little bit more disciplined. I like, just random things or like movies, comfort, self-care, having that set aside really helped us in the long haul because it's a large amount of debt to pay off that we went through.
It is. So you brought up a couple of really interesting points. I love that 45% went to investments and 45% went to debt. Because when I think about that, we always want to pay our credit card debt off as fast as we can, pay the highest interest rate off first. And sometimes I think that gets in the way of our 401k savings and those or our IRAs. It was fun. Over the weekend, I was showing someone that if you just put your money into your 401k, the tax savings is going to pay off your credit card. And like, what a concept. And so to just have that understanding of, I love it, 45% debt, 45% to investments, one is helping the other along the way.
Yeah, that's what really caught our eye too about this. And I think kept us going because you could imagine paying off the amount that we did over time, being able to still keep up with investments and take care of, for example, employer match. Mm-hmm. Things like that. And like you said, the tax benefits of it too, you'd know better than me as a financial planner, but that was a tremendous benefit to this program to be able to simultaneously invest. Because when you have such huge debt, the tendency, like you said, is to focus on the weight of that and try to pay that off. But you forget about the amazing, compound interest and the tax benefits you can get from investing. So doing both really helped. And now that we're done with our debt, we don't feel like we've wasted as much time because we have been able to at least, fund somewhat in investments with that extra amount along the way.
Okay. So now that you're living in that green gap and it's more beautiful, right? The debt's out of the way. Now what's the formula?
So the formula continued for us. And, I think the formula still continues 45% to debt because we do have a mortgage. and in California, you could imagine, that's going to take some time. But the 45% investment, because the gap is bigger now, more can go to investing as well. So that's been really fun. And I think the best part about it is the remaining 10%, because you have a bigger gap, you get more 10% money for fun. So we've been able to, do things like go on more, longer trips or, further away, have a little bit more time, money left over for date night. And a huge benefit to me, just from the budget perspective with that bigger gap, I was able to go part-time at work, which was,
huge.
That was enormous because, for a while you want to maximize that green gap. So I stayed full-time, really motivated to get that done. But right around the time I really needed to, with the whole COVID shutdown, I was able to go part-time and be home at the right moments with my family too. That was huge.
That's huge. And how old are your kids?
They're 6 and 9.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, you did need to be home with them during COVID. And what a great example for them that you could show up and here, be still the attorney and still be at home with them. And just the peace of mind of not having that debt had to have just been a godsend during this time.
Yeah, and it didn't quite plan it that way. But I think having that plan, we finished our final student loan payment in December of 2020. So after almost a year of just that uncertainty and having to, go part-time and all of that, but having the ability to have a plan and stick to that plan, especially for someone like me who had all of these other things going on, very easy to get distracted. But it was like, no, let's, stay the course on this with our plan.
I'm sure that there's probably places along the way where you may have gotten distracted or tempted to fall off the plan. Maybe one of you fell off the plan, one didn't. It's human nature. We're going to fall off the tracks. What happens then?
Yeah, absolutely. That has happened. Things like, or unexpected things would happen. The car would need extra work, or, for Christmas, you wouldn't stay as close to the budget as you probably should. And most of the time it was me kind of falling off track. But what was interesting, to go back to your point about shame, is because we had set monthly budget meetings, and we also use an online program that allows us to see all the transactions. So if we started to go off a little bit, we meaning me, it was not so much shame, oh, I got to hide this. It was like, oh, it's all there on paper and we're going to be open about it. But it was kind of getting back to that goal of, don't feel shame, because shame's just going to kind of pull you away from what you're doing. No, instead, get back to that goal that's written right there on your desk, that you're going to be, student loan free by December of 2020. So it was like replacing that shame with more of the positive motivation of what we are doing and why we're doing it. There's not much room left over to feel bad about something. You just got to get back on track.
I love that. Along the way, so did you have to refinance any of your student debt? Like, I think I hear of some of these horrendous loans that are almost usurious. They're not the government loans, but they are student loans nonetheless, and they can't be bankrupted. They can't be forgiven. You got to pay it off. What do you do when you have a debt like that? Did you have to refinance anything? And where do we go to do that?
We did. We graduated in 2008. So you could imagine what that was, and the kind of rates we were looking at, especially on private loans, which, by the way, we signed off on, as young 20-year-olds without ever knowing what that rate really meant. And so we actually got in touch with at the time, a pretty new company called Social Finance, which is now known as SoFi. And they helped us refinance our student loans and get them down to a much better rate, and then allowed us to shorten our window of payment to kind of keep us accountable as well. So that's primarily what we use to refi.
Got it. And there's some really critical things I would think that you looked at going into refinancing the debt. Like some of them, of course, a low interest rate, the term, can we afford it? But then I'm finding companies that like charge 3, 4, 5, I've even seen 10% of the loan just to bring it over and give you a 9% interest rate. So and a lot of it's in the fine print, like, well, you're an attorney. So if you are mentoring someone on how to read through those loans, what would you say?
Yeah, well, the first would be to have the confidence to look at that. I mean, the law now requires them to put a lot of the key terms right up front in the document, your interest rate. Another key thing to look for, and again, this is advice you could check with your financial planner or your counsel, but for us, the thing that really attracted us to the company we used is there was no penalty for prepayments either. Mm-hmm. And there was no, like you said, no percentages to pull it over. And if in fact, we actually got a discount and a benefit by moving it over. But I would say, number one thing for us was make sure you don't have a prepayment penalty. So if you start working this Green Gap plan or a similar plan, you can have the motivation to pay off that debt sooner without worrying about a penalty on the back end.
So this program, Oola, really changed your life. How did you find that? Tell us about Oola.
Yeah, I know I'm talking a lot about it, but really when something changes your life and you think it's going to help others, you get really excited to talk about it. So I found Oola sort of a little more outside of the financial world in a really tough time in my life. I had just had my second baby. I was coming back from maternity leave, back to full-time at work because having, not going part-time wasn't an option with the loans that we had. And I just was looking for something, on a hope and a prayer that could help me find that balance that was just continuing to be a struggle. Mm-hmm. And so I literally Googled in an act of desperation, right? I Googled, life balance. And then I just started typing in all the things that felt terrible in my life. Like life balance in your family and your career and your fitness. Because at that point, who has time to work out with 2 little babies and a career? And up pops this website called Oola, Find Balance in an Unbalanced World. And right off the bat, they have you take a test on the website, the old website, to see really, truly how out of balance your life was. And I mean, you try to look at this wheel, that Oola wheel, right? And I had a very messed up wheel. I mean, my career was strong, but all these other areas I had let fall by the wayside. And very quickly, I realized, okay, this is what was wrong. And one of those categories was finance. And, I could tell very quickly that no wonder I felt stuck. No wonder I felt like I was handcuffed to something I didn't want to be in. I had massive student loan payments that had to go out the door every month. So I found this website, and then it's actually connected with a book that was written by two doctors, Dr. Dave and Dr. Troy. And they're just great guys, but they basically had this calling to start sharing this message that helped them so much, this wheel and this Oola program, and really what's become a framework with the world. But the funny part is how they chose to do this is driving around in an old VW bus, which is very San Diego, very California of them. Right. They actually started down in Coronado. That was the very first start. And they started just driving this bus up the coast. And people would start asking them about why they were doing it. And so they started collecting, their whole goal was to collect dreams on this bus. And they started collecting these dream stickers and slapping them on the side of this bus. Fast forward, that bus is now covered, I think, 27 layers thick in dreams. And
no way, I got to find this bus.
Yeah, these dudes, these Oola guys, they have now over 1 million followers on social media, all because they just figured out something that worked for them, this Oola program. Balance in 7 key areas of life. And they wanted to share it with the world. So I got to meet them after reading the book and going to a few of their events. And that's sort of how, long story longer, how I got into it. So it wasn't just the finance piece, I would say was one of the most significant pieces, but it was also just setting goals in areas that I didn't always feel like I was great at, like setting goals in my family, setting goals with my fitness, to try to make sure, even though work got crazy, I was intentional, to use your word, intentional about everything else going on in my life as well.
Yeah. You know what? I love that this program exists, because I know when I sit down with my clients, they have a hard time saying what makes them happy. They have a hard time identifying it. And I end up doing this check the box financial planning, like pay off debt, check, buy a house, check, put the kids through college, check. And it's, that's not motivating. It's good, but it's not motivating. And I think true in my practice, when we look at that wheel of life and we see, is your wheel deflated? Is it flat? Is it out of balance? When we can start managing our money around that wheel and around what's important to us, life does get different. It even sounds to me like you just used the term, I don't feel so tied down to something I don't want to do. I mean, do you enjoy working more now that you're not working to pay off debt?
Yes, it's amazing. I've been in my same firm now for 13 years. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, because of the debt, you feel tied to it in a way that's negative. You feel, even though I love my firm and I love what I do, back then it was like, well, I may never make enough to get rid of these loans. And then, so instead of blaming the money, you start blaming, something that really doesn't deserve the blame. And I can tell you, it's amazing now that those loans are done and you kind of feel that freedom. I like my job even more because I know I want to do it. It's not because I have to do it to pay off these loans. I want to do it now. And I have the flexibility to do it part-time, which makes me like it even more.
Right.
so that's exactly right.
Fear and anger, you're living in abundance. And that's huge. That is just huge.
Yeah.
Kelley, you've got these 2 beautiful kids. If you could give any advice from the lessons you've learned, what would it be?
I think it would be honest with yourself, and you are, no more entitled to anything than anybody else. Meaning, I think on the first point, it's just life. And I feel like the way that our society is now, we can definitely kid ourselves into wanting things that we don't have, and to constantly, not necessarily appreciate what we have now. And then on the other side, it's just to really just be grateful. And even in Oola, it's called, we use this term over and over again, be grateful and have faith. So to really simplify it down for a 6-year-old and 9-year-old, and I do it, I say, hey, you're not being grateful. It's be grateful and have faith. And that's what I would share with them, even around money and the topic of finances.
That is a great message. So you love to mentor people, especially other attorneys. How can our audience find you? Because I would want to talk to you more and I want to hear more about what you have to offer. So how do we find Kelley Owens?
Yes, quickest way to track me down, of course, nowadays on social media. So I am most on Instagram at Oola Lawyer, and it's actually Oola_lawyer. But if you look that up, you should find me pretty quickly. And I also
spell Oola for me.
Oola.
Okay, good.
Yep. And then also you can find me on my website, www. And then it's just my name, KelleyAnnOwens.com.
Very
and
cool.
That's Kelley, Ann Owens. And so you you go that way and it'll kind of lead you to all the other things around Oola and the Green Gap and all of that. But yeah, feel free to send me a message on social media. I love hearing from people who have been in my situation or are still going through it, because that's the whole reason I'm doing this now with some extra time that I have.
I love that passion that you have. We're going to put the links in this website so people can find you really easily. You have been a gift to all of us, and I can't thank you enough, Kelley. You have a great day.
Thank you, Barbara. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Advisory services are offered through Barbara J. Norman, LLC, an investment advisor in the states of California and Texas. The information contained herein should in no way be construed or interpreted as a solicitation to sell, nor an offer to sell advisory services to any residents of any state other than the state of California, or where otherwise legally permitted. All content is for information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax or legal advice or provide the basis for any financial decisions. The information contained in this material has been derived from sources believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed as to accuracy and completeness and does not purport to be complete analysis of the materials discussed. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of SagePath Solutions and are subject to change without notice.